Welcome to the Festival of Dangerous Ideas podcast. Fetish started in 2009 and is the original disruptive ideas festival. Each year it brings to light important conversations that push the boundaries of conventional thought. The innovation obsession is truly upon us. It's seen as a vehicle for economic growth by all sides of the political game. And while seeking out novel ways of doing things is part of our innate capacity as creative humans, is there more merit to focusing on maintenance, repair and infrastructure than we already do? Vinsel is co-founder of The Maintainers, a research group challenging the preoccupation with innovation. They celebrate the mundane labour that makes the world tick. Please enjoy Vinsel's 2016 talk, The Innovation Fetish.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. It's really wonderful to be here. About a week ago, I was talking to my daughter, Henrietta, who's just about to turn 3, and I was telling her that I was going to come to Australia, and she asked me what I was going to do here. And I said, well, I'm going to give a talk. And she looked at me and she said, you're going to talk? Like, you talk a lot, too much here and home, actually. Why are you going to go all the way to Australia to bother those people? And I said, no, I'm going to give a talk on a stage, on a big stage. And she considered this for a moment, and then she said, yeah, but are you going to dance? And I promise you that I am not going to dance, because both for my body and for your poor eyeballs, that would be a truly dangerous idea. I'm not here to dance, but I am here to talk to you about an idea, a word. And if we use digital tools to track English usage over time, we find that we are literally hearing this word more than we ever have before. It's traveled all around the globe. It's taking the world by storm. And I know that you have heard it an awful lot recently here in Australia. And of course, that word is innovation. The introduction of new things, especially new technologies, into society. What I'm going to argue today is that there is a profound difference between innovation as a thing that really happens in this world and innovation as a word or concept which is surrounded by hype, rhetoric, nonsense, and false promises, or what I will call innovation speak. And I will argue further that we are better served by an alternative vision of human life with technology that is more grounded, more sober, and probably more boring, honestly. But before we can explore that alternative vision, we must understand how we came to our innovation-dominated moment, and also why our kinky little innovation fetish so often fails us. Now, the single most important cause that led us to this innovation speak-dominated moment is the role of innovation in industrial capitalism. Here, it's really helpful to make that distinction between innovation as the thing that really happens and as speech. Between the late 19th century and about 1970, many industrialized nations around the globe went through an unprecedented period of technological revolution and economic growth. This revolution included the introduction of modern plumbing, sewerage, electricity, telephones, automobiles, airplanes, modern chemicals, electronics, and so many other things. These things radically altered the daily experiences of those people who had access to them. And of course, we all know that there's many places in this world where people still don't have access to these things, and that we could talk about that. That would be a whole nother talk. That would be a whole nother lecture series, right? But if innovation is the introduction of new things played a fundamental role in transforming industrialized nations during this period. The technological world of 1970 was a different technological world than 1870. But here's the thing. For many Western nations, this extended period of rapid growth came to an end in about 1970. Yet use of the term innovation, and especially the phrase technological innovation, only really took off in the 1960s and 1970s. Which means that most of this technological change and economic growth, the actual process of innovation, occurred without the assistance of the term technological innovation. The thing happened before and without the aid of the jargon. So then the question is, like, where did the jargon come from? Now, one source of the jargon is that it was a group of economists working in the United States in the late 50s and early 1960s, and they were trying to make sense of a puzzle. By that time, they had some pretty good economic statistics, and what they were finding is that the traditional factors that were exposed to explain economic growth, like changes in capital and labor, simply could not explain that growth. There was some kind of X factor out there that was creating all this bounty. And so these economists hypothesized that that X factor was technological change or innovation. And over the ensuing years, this became an orthodox view. Now, if you believe that technological innovation is a good thing, and that it is leading to this even better thing called economic growth, it's quite natural and completely understandable to ask, well, how do we get more of these good things? There was a real turning point in this history in the 1970s, however. It was during this time that the term innovation policy started being used. Now, innovation policy put it in clearer and clearer terms that the point of government policy, law, rules, tax codes, and all of these things should be to induce innovation. Innovation policy became a way to view all of society from the highest level of the economy to the most intimate level of the individual human being. The highest level, you can ask, how much economic growth do we have? At a slightly lower level, how many patents are we producing? How much entrepreneurship are we seeing? And then finally, at the lowest level, what kind of skills are ending up in the bodies and minds of our children? Now, make no mistake, innovation policy is about remaking every aspect of our society into the corporate image. This is about reforming the most basic institutions of our culture, science, government, our schools, universities, in the name of commerce. Innovation fetishists like to talk about imagination, creativity, ideas, even idea booms. That was in Turnbull's plan. But this isn't about you falling in love with someone, locking yourself in a bedroom, and writing a poem that sets this person's heart on fire. And it's also not about doing science because the world is full of wonder and mystery, and because our lives are made richer when we better understand our universe. This is about creativity that you can commercialize. This is about imagination that you can mine and turn into profit. Now, it's about this time that innovation policy emerged in the late 70s and early 80s that we start seeing books being written about this place named Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley got turned into a kind of mental model, and cities all around the world, from China to Europe to India to the American Midwest where I grew up to Australia, wanted to be the next Silicon Valley. Now, last year, opposition leader Bill Shorten said, basically, we have got an aspiration to help turn Silicon Valley into Kangaroo Valley. I thought that was wonderful. The obsession with Silicon Valley is a little confusing when we think about it. Sure, the valley is home to super rich tech companies like Facebook and Google, but these companies employ very few people when it comes down to it. And more important, Silicon Valley is a tremendously unequal place, divided between haves and have-nots, between the tech-educated geniuses and the uneducated poor, often immigrants, who tend to the geniuses' lawns, make the geniuses' foods, and care for the geniuses' children. Now, given that reality, why is Silicon Valley someplace that you would hope to emulate? But I would argue that if humans excel at anything, it is at ignoring reality. So to this day, Silicon Valley remains a kind of model that localities hope to accomplish and governments hope to produce. And since the 1990s, we have heard innovation speak more and more all around the globe, including here in Australia. Now, innovation speak has several problems and ironies. I've already mentioned one of them. The era of innovation speak and innovation policy only emerged after the period when the most profound innovation had come to an end. In this way, I think innovation speak almost appears to be a form of compensation for what is lacking. It's a bit like an older guy who buys a sports car. You know? Please look at this shiny thing right here, and let's forget what's missing, which is significant growth. But to go beyond irony, I think there are three fundamental problems with innovation speak. The first, briefly, is that while innovation speak pretends to be about optimism and opportunity and boundless future, it's in fact a rhetoric of fear. Often it's a fear of being left behind, whether that means our nation not competing in the global economy, our businesses being disrupted, or our children failing to find a job because they do not know how to code. The second problem is that instead of encouraging us to deal with real pressing problems in our society, innovation speak gives us promises for what the future will bring. And when I talk about this ideology, I often point people to Christopher Nolan's 2014 film, Interstellar, which if you haven't seen, I'm about to ruin for you right now. So if you don't want to hear about it, go ahead and cover your ears. Now, the film opens with the people of Earth facing a prototypical environmental apocalypse. Crops are failing, there are dust storms. Soon the father in the movie, who's played by Matthew McConaughey, has an opportunity to join a team that is leaving Earth and flying through a wormhole in hopes of finding a new home for humanity. Once he gets through the wormhole, he hooks up with some aliens, and he has some kind of realization. And then through the magic of time travel and wormholes, he's able to communicate that realization back to Earth to his daughter, who, lo and behold, saves the world. But here's the thing. What precisely the father tells the daughter is left a complete mystery, and of course that's totally necessary, because if Christopher Nolan knew how to save the world, he should save the world and not make a Matthew McConaughey movie, right? But the film asks us to take it on faith that such a thing is possible, right? It's like, but of course there's no technology just waiting over the horizon to save our asses or save us from ourselves. There just isn't. Yet the idea that there could even be such a thing perfectly aligns with the tech-centric libertarian ideology coming out of Silicon Valley. And this brings us to the third and final problem with innovation speak. While we are busy treating innovation policy like economic Viagra for our significant growth problems, innovation fetishists are also passing a bunch of policies that A, aren't proven to work, and B, mostly help the wealthy. It's hard to tell if individual innovation policies have much benefit, and there are good reasons for being skeptical. After all, innovation policy has existed since the 70s. As a result of it, are we currently living in a period of staggering economic growth? No, just the opposite. Innovation policy has become something like a standardized set of tools, including many aspects of Turnbull's plan. Tax breaks, research funding, various incentives, nearly all of which help people who already have money, at least to some degree. Now, it's no coincidence, I think, that the age of innovation speak is also the age of increasing inequality, including, I was saddened to hear, here in Australia. So there's the three problems: fear, promissory notes, and policies that might not be good for much other than ensuring those who already have more. But on top of all of this, there's one more thing. And I haven't counted it as one of the problems because I don't want you to think I'm shallow. On top of all the problems inherent in the innovation-centric view, innovation speak is also horribly annoying. For some reason, our leaders have decided they have to bludgeon us with a kind of standardized package of Silicon Valley-approved rhetoric. Innovation, disruption, disruptive innovation, angel investors, thought leaders. I'm sure you guys are all thought leaders. I don't want to. Entrepreneurship, change agents, startups, incubators, regional innovation hubs, unicorns, STEM education. I read in an article that your prime minister has recently taken to the word agile, a beloved Silicon Valley term. Agile. We have to be agile. Everything's agile. At some point, it's just like, it's like someone's got your arm behind your back. It's like, Uncle, You can pass any policy you want, do anything, just don't talk like that anymore. At some point, it just all got to be too much for me and my friends. A couple of years ago, I started going around and giving a talk where I pretended to be a part of an Alcoholics Anonymous-style 12-step group called Inno-Anon. And I would stand up and I would say, hello, my name is Lee, and I'm an innovation speaker in recovery. You can imagine that didn't go over too well at innovation conferences. But the final straw came in 2014 when the American journalist Walter Isaacson published his book, The Innovators: How a Group of Hackers, Geniuses, and Geeks Created the Digital Revolution. And my friend and co-author, Andy Russell, who I wish was here with me very much, sent an email to me saying we had to write a counter volume and that we should call it The Maintainers: How a Group of Bureaucrats, Standards Engineers, and Introverts Created Technologies That Kind of Work Most of the Time. Thank you. So it all started as a joke, literally, okay? And we put it out on Twitter, and it started getting traction. And then we decided we'd hold a conference. So this past April, we held this conference, The Maintainers, in Hoboken, New Jersey, at my school, Stevens Institute of Technology. Hoboken's just across the river from Manhattan. And then, to our surprise, news of the conference went viral. It got picked up by The Atlantic, The Guardian, Le Monde, many other publications. I was interviewed by your ABC radio. And I have to tell you that this felt really weird. Okay, because academic conferences full of nerds and computer historians don't go viral. That's not something that happens on this planet. So we had a real question, what is going on here? And then soon emails just started to roll in from all over the planet, from Europe and Russia and Africa and Singapore and Australia. And everyone was telling us the same thing, is that innovation speak was everywhere, and that wasn't it just nice to have someone pushing back a little bit. Now, since that time, we've been working to put forward an alternative view of human life with technology, which we call the Maintainers. And if I've highlighted 3 problems with innovation speak, let me also put forward 3 aspects of this alternative view. But before I begin, I have to say that I have a great deal of trepidation coming to Australia to talk about maintenance, given your long and proud tradition of thinking about this subject. For instance, in 1978, some prescient and insightful young men took to the public airwaves and began calling themselves men at work. Now, if there's any bit of correction needed here, it's that quite often when we were talking about the labor of maintaining and sustaining society, we're actually talking about women at work. But more seriously, whereas innovation policy has become a kind of one-size-fits-all standardized package prescriptions that can seemingly be applied anywhere, attending to ordinary human life with technology means focusing on the local, including local needs. I know what innovation speak is hiding and ignoring in my backyard, but I don't know what it's doing here. And so I'm not going to be as arrogant as innovation fetishists to come here and pretend I know. So I hope we can turn to that in discussion. So here's 3 things. Number 1, technology is not innovation. When many people talk about technology, they basically mean like smartphones and digital gadgets. But technology, a useful technology, or definition of technology is a much more expansive definition, which includes all human-made objects that have use, including basic tools like hammers and spoons. When we begin to think this way, we realize that most technologies are not new, but are in fact quite old. Things like electric fans and many aspects of automobiles have remained virtually unchanged for over a century. While innovation is an important part of technology's life cycle, once technologies are out there, they spend most of their time being non-innovations. We expect them, we assume them, and we ignore them. Like the chairs you're sitting on right now. Do you feel like they're innovatively holding your backside? Do you feel your bottom being innovated? I don't know. But they're working fine. I'm sure you're comfortable, right? And that's good. Going down this line then it leads us to start to realize the crucial importance of those technologies that we call infrastructure. Our sewers, water systems, roadways, airports, power grids, all these things that when they work make modern life modern. And yet with our focus on innovation, we so often neglect and abuse these basic systems. Now this might be particularly true in the United States. Over the last couple of years, we've heard a lot of stories about major infrastructure failures in the States. This includes the lead poisoning of American water systems, most famously in Flint, Michigan, but it also turns out in water systems around the nation. And it also includes fires in the Washington, D.C. subway system, which killed 1 person and led to 2 lines being shut down for a year. And it turned out that these problems were all the result of deferred maintenance and repair, which hadn't been done because of budgetary restrictions. Now, on top of causing danger and harm, our crumbling infrastructure also cuts down on our ability to do business. I have a friend who works for the kind of famous, once microbrewery brewing company called Sierra Nevada, and he told me that American railroad beds are so bad and they cause so much vibration and rocking that they have to put extra packaging and cushioning into the rail trucks. And that means that they can send less beer with every shipment, right? And it cuts into their profits. But then I think we have to really ask ourselves a deep question, which is, have we lost sight of our basic values to such a terrible degree that we're even willing to risk the life of our beer? I mean, our kids maybe, but our beer? And here's the third point. Focusing on ordinary technologies and infrastructure leads us to consider those individuals who we call the maintainers. All the ordinary people who simply keep our society going, like all the people back here who are helping run this show right now. The vast majority of human labor does not introduce new things, but instead sustains our ordinary humdrum reality. And when we examine this kind of labor, we find that much of it is low status and low paid. Much of it is domain of women and racial and ethnic minorities. We often neglect our maintainers, we ignore the good they do us, and often we take advantage of them. Now, people often ask us, what percentage of human labor is put towards maintenance instead of innovation? This is very hard to determine. We have good numbers in some places. Like we know in the Air Force, there are 20 maintainers for every pilot. Focusing on digital technologies here can be helpful because journalists and hype mongers like to focus on computers that run themselves, on algorithms, on AI, on robots that are going to take our jobs. But when we examine computing, what we find in reality is a bunch of human beings working. The historian Nathan Ensminger points out that between 70 and 80% of computing budgets go into maintenance and upkeep. Software fixes, bug patches, help desks, IT departments, even our most cutting-edge technologies run on the backs of maintainers. And for the last year, it's come out that Parts of Facebook's system, that, like its trending list that everyone assumed was run by algorithms, are in fact run by perfectly ordinary human beings who have flaws like political biases. The researcher Lily Irani has looked at how low-paid laborers scrub digital information, like low-paid workers in India who scan advertisements for porn, violence, and alcohol. And we can think all of the work that goes into moderating internet comment fields in the endless and completely hopeless task of simply maintaining common decency. If innovation policy is a bust, we can talk in the discussion about what maintainer policy might look like. In the United States, I think it would include funding infrastructure, raising the minimum wage, and publicly funding childcare. And if I go on for too long, I'll sound boring and I'll sound like Bernie Sanders, basically. Also, since I've arrived here, many Australians have like this strange and seemingly irresistible desire to talk to me about some guy named Donald Trump. And if you'd like to talk about, in the discussion, we can talk about how the Trump phenomenon connects this maintainer stuff, because it does in deep ways. But for now, let me conclude by saying this. Technology is important. We live in a different world today than we did 2 centuries ago. Innovation, the real process, has been important, is important, will be important. It's part of what capitalism is good at. But innovation is not a value in itself. It's not something for us to worship. And it's not something that you can just conjure up no matter how many times you say the word agile. The reality is that we often neglect the ordinary technologies that make up our lives, and the fruits of these modern systems have always been unequally distributed, with some people left behind. We're much better served by focusing on these basic issues. We're much better served by focusing, for instance, and asking ourselves the question of whether Black lives and Aboriginal lives matter. We're much better served by looking away from our gadgets and taking care of the ordinary and the humdrum. Isn't it terrible that in this age of cringeworthy and repetitious and emulative innovation speak, caring for the mundane somehow feels like a real innovation, maybe even like a dangerous idea? Thank you very much.
This session was recorded live at the Sydney Opera House. The Festival of Dangerous Ideas is presented by the Ethics Centre. The Ethics Centre delivers programs and experiences designed to bring ethics to the centre of our life. We offer counselling for individuals, consulting, leadership and development services. As a non-profit charity, we rely heavily on donations to continue our work, which can be made via our website. Thank you.